The search is underway in Mexico today for Nancy Guthrie. It's the third search for her in just over a month, just across the Arizona border down in Mexico.
12 News journalist Trisha Hendricks is here with us now. And Trisha, what are we learning?
Well, Troy, right now crews are searching in a remote area near the Mariposa port of entry along the Arizona border. This after the leader of a volunteer group says she got an anonymous tip in the case. The group Buscando Corazones, along with Mexican authorities and criminal justice students, headed out to the Mariposa area to search for Nancy Guthrie, who's been missing since February 1st. The Wednesday morning search was originally set to begin Tuesday, but was pushed back a day after Mexican authorities weren't available to take part. This search is the third in a month after receiving the tip on a possible grave site. Volunteers alongside Mexican authorities conducted a search May 16th, then returned again on Wednesday. The group's leader, Ramona Guadalupe Ayala Ortiz, tells 12 News she's hopeful. She says an anonymous caller gave her specific instructions to look near a stream under a tree. The group has already searched 2 other streams in the area without success. Ayala Ortiz says this time they've narrowed down the search location.
Yes, today we go on a search at El Mariposa. We had an anonymous call about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance.
Local, state, and federal authorities are also in the area, telling 12 News they are there to keep the group safe, however, not to take part in the investigation itself. Nancy Guthrie was last seen January 31st and reported missing from her Tucson home the next day. So far, no arrests have been made.
It's always with me, you know. I cry every morning on the way to work, and I cry every morning on the way home.
The last confirmed evening of Nancy Guthrie's life at home began ordinarily enough. At 5:32 in the afternoon on Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy requested an Uber from her Catalina Foothills home. She was heading to dinner at the home of her daughter Annie and Annie's husband, Tomasso Cioni. It was the kind of visit that happened regularly. Family, a meal. Nothing out of the ordinary. She spent the evening there. At 9:48 p.m., Tomasso drove Nancy back to her home, roughly a 10-minute trip. He pulled up. She went inside. The garage door opened, then closed. That was the last time anyone confirmed seeing Nancy Guthrie alive. What happened between 9:48 p.m. that Saturday night and the following afternoon is what investigators have spent months trying to reconstruct. Here is what the evidence established. At approximately 2:30 a.m. on Sunday, February 1st, Nancy's pacemaker device disconnected from her smartphone. Pacemakers in 2026 sync to a paired phone to transmit health data. When that connection drops, it means one thing: the device moved out of range. That disconnection became the single most important forensic timestamp in the entire case. It told investigators that sometime around 2:30 in the morning, Nancy was no longer near her own phone. She had been moved. By noon on February 1st, alarm had already reached the family. Nancy had not shown up at a friend's house to watch a church service online together. That was not something Nancy skipped. Her friend contacted the family. The family contacted law enforcement. A missing person report was filed. When investigators arrived at her home, what they found told an immediate story. Nancy's phone was still inside. Her purse was still inside. The back doors of the home were propped open, and near the front entrance, there was blood. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos faced cameras shortly after and stated it plainly. Nancy Guthrie did not leave her home on her own accord. This was not a wandering. This was not confusion. A crime had been committed at that residence, and an 84-year-old woman was gone. The Pima County Sheriff's Department contacted the FBI. A multi-agency investigation opened immediately, and the clock on finding Nancy Guthrie started counting in the wrong direction. When investigators walked through Nancy Guthrie's front door, they were not met with the kind of scene that announces itself loudly. There was no ransacked room, no overturned furniture. What they found instead were specific, deliberate anomalies, each one small on its own, and together pointing towards something calculated. The blood came first. drops near the front entrance, collected, tested, and confirmed through DNA analysis to belong to Nancy Guthrie. That result told investigators something happened to her at or near that doorway before she left the property. It was physical confirmation that her departure was not peaceful and it was not voluntary. The back doors of the home were propped open. Not broken, not forced, open. That detail raised an immediate question about how someone entered, how they left, and whether that open door was accidental or deliberate. Left that way to suggest something or to allow for something. Investigators documented it and kept moving. Then there was the doorbell camera. A Nest device mounted at Nancy's front door had been tampered with. The individual responsible first attempted to physically knock it loose from its mounting. When that failed, they covered the lens with foliage taken from a potted plant nearby. The attempt was methodical. It was also unsuccessful. Despite the interference, FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed publicly that data from the device had been successfully recovered. Whoever stood at that door underestimated what that camera had already captured. Investigators also removed a dark-colored SUV from Nancy's garage and took a camera from the roof of the property for analysis. The septic tank in the backyard was searched as part of the effort to account for every corner of the property. 10 days into the investigation, on February 10th, the FBI made a decision that changed the public dimension of this case entirely. They released 4 black and white still images and a short video clip pulled from Nancy's doorbell camera. What those images showed was a figure standing at Nancy Guthrie's front door in the early morning hours of February 1st, 2026. The individual was masked. He wore gloves. He carried a holstered weapon and had on his back a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack. The FBI identified that backpack as one sold exclusively through Walmart. Investigators began working directly with Walmart to trace the purchase of that specific pack and attempt to identify who bought it. The FBI described the suspect as a male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build. Sheriff Chris Nanos reviewed the footage and noted the individual appeared to be wearing a ring on one hand, a detail he flagged to his team for closer forensic examination. Separately, security footage from around the neighborhood suggested this same individual may have visited or surveilled the area before February 1st. An initial report tied that earlier footage to January 11th. Google, which provided data connected to that footage, later clarified they could not confirm the specific date. Investigators continued examining the January 11 possibility as a lead. The FBI also visited a Tucson gun shop owner named Philip Martin. Agents showed him a list of between 18 and 24 names along with photographs as part of their effort to trace the weapon seen in the footage. Martin confirmed that no one on the list had made a purchase at his shop. Within the first weeks, approximately 400 investigators were working the case across multiple agencies. Between 40,000 and 50,000 tips had come in from the public. Every one of them required evaluation. The suspect on that porch had a face no one could see. Finding him became the central mission of one of the largest missing person investigations the state of Arizona had ever seen. While investigators were processing the crime scene and reviewing doorbell footage, something else was happening simultaneously. Notes were arriving. Within days of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance becoming national news, Ransom communications began surfacing at media outlets across the country. The primary recipient was TMZ. Harvey Levin, the outlet's founder, became publicly involved in reporting the contents of what his organization received, and the details he shared moved fast across every platform covering the case. The first note that drew serious law enforcement attention demanded millions of dollars, payable in Bitcoin. It came with a hard deadline, 5 p.m. on a Monday, approximately 1 week after Nancy vanished. The demand was specific enough that investigators could not dismiss it outright. FBI Special Agent in Charge Heath Janke, who led the FBI's Phoenix field office and served as the Bureau's primary public voice on the case, addressed it directly. He confirmed that investigators were treating the note seriously and that the deadline had been noted. He declined to share the full contents publicly. A second deadline followed shortly after the first. That one passed as well, without incident and without any confirmed payment. Then came a note that law enforcement handled differently from everything else. Around February 6th, a second communication was sent to media outlets, including Tucson's KGUN and CBS affiliate KOLD. This one did not make a demand. It made a claim. According to that note, Nancy Guthrie had died shortly after being taken from her home. The implication was that whoever wrote it was either the person responsible for her disappearance or someone with direct knowledge of what had happened to her. Law enforcement immediately asked that the contents of this note be kept from public release. The request was honored. Investigators needed the information contained in that communication to remain private so that any future correspondence could be evaluated without public contamination of the details. That note stayed out of public reporting for more than 4 months. It was not revealed until June 22nd, 2026, when NBC News reported its existence and its central claim. By July 1st, 2026, the FBI's Phoenix office issued a formal written statement addressing the full scope of what had been received over the course of the investigation. The Bureau confirmed it had received several ransom notes. Some had been determined to be extortion attempts with no legitimacy whatsoever. Others were still being evaluated and had not been ruled out as potentially genuine. That distinction created a real operational problem. Every note that arrived, regardless of how credible it appeared on the surface, had to be traced, analyzed, and assessed before investigators could categorize it. Fraudulent communications were not just a nuisance. They consumed investigative resources and complicated the effort to isolate authentic contact from noise. Law enforcement made multiple arrests connected to fraudulent notes throughout the investigation. Sheriff Chris Nanos addressed it publicly, warning that anyone who sent a false communication in connection with this case would be prosecuted. The Bureau had already made several arrests, and it was not finished. The ransom note situation had become its own investigation running parallel to the search for Nancy, and the two were about to intersect in federal court. Before we go further into the investigation, if you are new to Unsolved Files, right now is the moment to hit that subscribe button. Subscribe now so you are not catching up later.